threes, no S3s. Navy didn't just fight the Viet Cong threes, they negotiated with Ghosts threes. In the twisted waterways of South Vietnam's Mekong Delta, where maps lied and rivers remembered, there were missions that never made it into the history books, threes. Patrol reports were rewritten, threes. Testimonies buried, threes. But for the men of the Brown Water Navy, the war wasn't just fought with bullets and boats. Threes, it was fought against things that didn't bleed, threes. Things that didn't breathe, threes. Things that watched silently from beneath the surface, threes. Between 1967 and 1971, multiple U-3s, S-3s, Navy riverine units filed classified reports detailing encounters with non-human entities in what locals called the haunted veins of Vietnam threes. These weren't just ghost stories, threes. These were military engagements with the supernatural documented, recorded, and then sealed under layers of national silence, threes. What you're about to hear comes from declassified testimony, suppressed medical records, and the voices of men who've never been the same, threes. This isn't a horror story, threes. It's a war story the Pentagon never wanted told, threes, because in the Mekong Delta, the boundary between the living and the dead didn't just blur, it broke, threes. This is not just about haunted rivers, threes. This is about dead soldiers who still follow orders, monasteries that float between dimensions, and a ghost army that once shut down 6 Navy boats without firing a single shot, threes. If you think you know the Vietnam War, think again, threes. You haven't heard what the water remembers, threes. These are the encounters that reshaped military protocol and haunted American veterans for the rest of their lives. Threes. Encounters with spirits older than any flag temples anchored in spiritual realms, and guardians who demanded respect in exchange for safe passage, threes. This is the river devils of the Mekong, the hidden war beneath the war, threes. And some say it never really ended. Thrifaz, Petty Officer First Class Delmer, Hutchkins didn't believe in ghosts until the river made him threes. By the time his patrol boat entered the Song Doi, the river of hungry ghosts, he'd already logged 8 months of riverine warfare in the Mekong Delta threes. He had seen ambushes erupt from tree lines without warning, threes. He had pulled bodies from water so murky they felt half alive, threes. But nothing, not enemy fire, not landmines, not the constant presence of death, prepared him for what happened on that river, threes. His PBR crew included engineman 2nd Class Otis Kellum Gunners, mate 3rd Class Vernon Patchett, and seaman Lester Griggs, threes. All 4 would later be flagged for medical discharge under psychological distress, and their case files were quietly sealed with a Class Red anomaly code, military speak, for burn it if someone asks, threes. According to Hutchkins' debriefing at Dong Tam Naval Base, the first sign that something was wrong wasn't visual, threes, it was temperature, threes. Water in the Mekong ran warm, like bathwater, year-round, 3 says. But as soon as their boat turned into Song Doi, the temperature dropped hard, he says. 58 degrees Fahrenheit, threes. Unheard of for that region, especially during dry season, threes. I remember checking the thermometer twice. Hutchkins later said, threes. It wasn't just cold, threes. It felt occupied, threes. The boat's sonar lit up next massive movement below the keel. Hundreds of blips moving as one, like a living wall of something, threes. Fish, maybe, threes. But fish didn't track boats, threes. Fish didn't stay exactly 15 feet below us, match our speed, adjust when we turned threes. Otis Kellum, the engineer, described it best. It wasn't swimming, threes. It was shadowing us, threes. As they moved deeper, the water's colour changed, threes. The usual muddy brown gave way to a thick, oily black, threes. Not just dark, light-absorbing, threes. like the river itself was trying to erase their reflection threes. That's when the voices began threes, not overhead radio chatter threes, not jungle echoes threes, voices bubbling up through the whole threes, no language anyone could recognize threes, not English threes, not Vietnamese threes, something older threes, something wet threes. They weren't coming from outside the boat, Patchett said threes. They were inside the metal threes, like the ship had grown lungs. Threes. In Vietnamese folklore, Malay are water spirits, souls trapped by violent death, bound to rivers and lakes until their spiritual needs are met. Threes. The Mekong Delta, with thousands of years of blood spilled into its channels, had no shortage of such spirits. Threes. And Song Doi, that was where they gathered threes. The engine died at the deepest bend in the River Threes. No warning, threes. No mechanical error, threes. Just silence, threes. Later inspection found nothing wrong, threes. The boat had simply shut down, like it had been told to threes. That's when they surfaced, threes. Not bodies, threes. Not swimmers, threes. Apparitions standing on the water like it was concrete, threes. Dozens of them, threes. Men and women in traditional Vietnamese garments, faded, rotted, but they moved like silk underwater, threes. They didn't break the surface, threes. They stood above it, threes. Their skin was bloated pale, the texture of drowned flesh, threes. Their eyes were open, black, focused, threes. Not random ghosts, threes. Witnesses, threes. They weren't attacking Griggs, recalled later. Threes. They were watching, threes. Judging, threes. And then they spoke, threes. Not with mouths, threes. Not with breath, threes. But the words carried clear across the still water, threes. We are the guardians of this channel, one said, threes. We are the memory of bloodshed, threes. We protect the peace of the drowned, threes. Their leader identified himself as a Cham warrior, a soldier from centuries ago who died defending the Delta from Khmer invasion, threes. Others among them included French colonial troops, World War II, Japanese soldiers, Viet Minh, guerrillas, all united by one thing, death in the River Threes. They weren't interested in nations, threes. They didn't care about politics, threes. They had one question. Why do you carry weapons on sacred water? Hutchkins tried to explain, threes. He was met with silence, threes, then a proposal, threes. The spirits offered safe passage in exchange for acknowledgement, threes. Don't desecrate their resting places, threes. Respect the rules of the water, threes. And in return, they would protect you from things even worse, threes. Things that live beneath them, threes. The negotiation took 3 hours, threes. When the spirit submerged again, the boat's engine restarted on its own, threes. The river turned brown, threes. The sonar cleared, threes. The cold faded, threes. None of the men ever spoke publicly, threes. But in VA hospitals and bars and midnight phone calls, they described the same thing. The water looked at us. Threes. And it decided, for now, we were allowed to leave 3S. Ash, Commander Thurston Alcott wasn't a man easily shaken, threes. He'd led dozens of operations along the Mekong's arterial chaos, search and destroy missions, blockade patrols, covert insertions, threes. But what he saw on the Bassac River in 1969 didn't fit inside any military manual, threes. It didn't belong in war, threes. It barely belonged in reality. Threes. Alcott's unit, part of Task Force 1-17's River Assault Squadron, had been advancing on what intelligence flagged as a major Viet Cong staging area, threes. Aerial reconnaissance had captured hazy outlines, possible bunkers, supply nodes, campfire smoke, threes. Standard hot zone, threes. But what they found waiting wasn't jungle threes. It was a Buddhist temple threes, floating threes, immobile, anchored to nothing, yet perfectly still. Threes. Maybe 300 feet long, Alcott recorded in his classified after-action report. Threes. Stone walls. Threes. Towering gates. Threes. Lotus gardens in full bloom. Threes. And the whole thing was sitting on the river, like it was concrete threes. Depth readings below showed 60 feet of water. Threes. Nothing but silt and current threes. No platform threes. No foundation threes. The temple was impossible threes. And yet it was there threes. Closer inspection only made things worse. Threes. The temple looked ancient, weather-worn stone, engraved with carvings that shimmered in and out of visibility when viewed from the side. Threes. Some men said the images moved. Threes. Others said they whispered. Threes. The lead infantry unit commanded by Lutzakas. Threes. Colonel Webster Finn dispatched 2 assault boats for closer reconnaissance. Threes. But the boats hit something invisible. Threes. Or it wasn't physical resistance. Staff Sergeant Irving Coaster reported 3 years. It was like being pushed back by a thought. 3 years. The boats couldn't approach within 20 feet. 3 years. The river itself was defending the temple. Threes. Then the monks appeared. Threes. Dozens of them in orange robes walked out from the temple and onto the river's surface. Threes. Not across a bridge. Threes. Not in boats. Threes. They walked. Threes. On water. Threes. Their feet made no ripple. Threes. Their robes flowed like they were still submerged. Threes. Some chewed beetle leaves. Threes. One adjusted his glasses. Threes. It was casual. Threes. Like physics had agreed to look away for a moment. Threes. The eldest monk walked alone straight across 200 yards of open river until he stood at the bow of Alcott's lead patrol craft. Threes. His face calm. Threes. His voice unbroken. Threes. You bring war to sacred water, he said. Threes. He introduced himself as Tikmok, abbot of a monastery that had occupied that site for over 100 to 200 years. Threes. He spoke perfect English with a cadence that felt wrong. Threes. Too clear. Threes. Too old. Threes. According to the abbot, the temple had been shifted into what he called the spirit dimension during the French colonial occupation to protect it from destruction. Threes. It only reappeared during sacred ceremonies, full moons, ancestral feasts, and rituals for the drowned. Threes. We exist in multiple realities, the monk explained. Threes. You arrived during a window. Threes. We allow you to see. Threes. The abbot didn't threaten. Threes. He negotiated. Threes. He offered intelligence. Enemy movements, weapon shipments, strategic routes, in exchange for respect. Threes. His condition the temple be left alone during its manifestations. Threes. No weaponry, no noise, no violation of the rights. Threes. The spirits report everything to us, he said. Threes. Even your own dead whisper in our halls. Threes. Alcott, with no military protocol for interdimensional religious diplomacy, agreed to the terms. Threes. A new designation was added to their maps. Zone X-77. Do not enter during full moon. Threes. The temple began fading the moment the agreement was sealed. Threes. Its walls turned translucent. Threes. Its gardens melted into fog. Threes. The monks walked backward into mist. Threes. Within minutes the entire structure was gone. Threes. Not a ripple remained. Threes. But the intelligence they began to provide. Accurate. Threes. Constant. Threes. Lethal. Threes. Alcott later testified that those monks saved more American lives than any airstrike I ever called in. Threes. For the rest of the war, every full moon brought back the temple. Threes. Just for a few hours. Threes. Always silent. Threes. Always watching. Threes. And always followed by whisper networks among you. Threes. S3s. Officers, the ghosts are XF and have something new. 3s. Lieutenant Commander Augustus Gator Blackthorne had seen enough combat to know when something was wrong, but this wasn't just wrong 3s. It was impossible 3s. During the weeks leading up to the Tet Offensive SEAL team, Echo was tasked with high-risk reconnaissance along the Sa-Mau Peninsula, chasing down rumours of mass NVA troop movements, 3s. Satellite intelligence showed what looked like a full regimental base, but aerial flyovers revealed no signs of life, 3s. No heat signatures, 3s. No movement, 3s. Just static formations, 3s. Their mission was simple: verify or debunk the ghost base, 3s. What they found was the one thing they'd never trained for a dead army still fighting 3s. The team inserted under moonless skies via high-speed boat 3s. The locals had warned them to avoid the area. 3s. They called it Vong Ma Ghost Bay, 3s. Fishermen refused to cast nets there, 3s. Vietnamese elders whispered that it was where orders go to die, 3s. From the first second, nothing felt right, 3. The water was black, said Floyd Wessels, the team's corpsman, 3s. Not dark 3s, black 3s. Like oil mixed with cold, 3s. You could see your breath, 3s. That doesn't happen in Vietnam. 3s. Equipment began failing immediately. 3s. Compasses spun. 3s. Radios hissed with voices in unknown languages. 3s. Pressure gauges on their dive gear spiked as if they were descending into the deep sea, except they were still at surface level, 3s. Then they found the gear, 3s. Strewn along the shore were weapons from every war Vietnam had ever endured. French rifles, Japanese swords, Viet Minh flags, even American ammo boxes that hadn't been manufactured since 1966, 3s. Some items were centuries old: matchlocks, crossbows, obsidian blades wrapped in soaked cloth. 3s. And all of it was clean 3s. Maintained 3s. Prepared 3s. Then Lung, the team's electronics specialist, picked up something that stopped the entire operation. Cold, an American field radio model, only issued to SEAL Teams 3s. Still working 3s. Still receiving transmissions 3s. I recognised the call sign. Lung said 3s. It belonged to a unit that went missing in 66. 3s. Officially declared KIA 3s. We'd just found their ghosts and they were still reporting in 3s. Pushing deeper inland, they located the coordinates identified in the satellite imagery 3s. The camp was textbook trenches, bunkers, supply depots, machine gun nests 3s. Every defensive detail was by the book, 3s. But the soldiers manning it, they were dead 3s. Skin bloated and grey 3s. Some missing fingers 3s. Others half faces 3s. Uniforms shredded and soaked 3s. But they moved with discipline 3s. They patrolled 3s. Communicated in signals 3s. Cleaned weapons 3s. They held formation like they never got the message that the war was over 3s. They didn't act like zombies, said Quartermaster Grabowski, 3s. They acted like soldiers, 3s. Historical cross-referencing later confirmed the area had been the site of an American bombing run in 1966, 3 says. Over 800 NVA soldiers drowned after a deliberate breach of the dike system, 3s. The command was to hold at all costs, 3s. Apparently they took that literally, 3s. As SEAL Team Echo tried to retreat, the regiment mobilised 3s. Not fast 3s, not loud 3s, but organised 3s, coordinated 3s, tactical 3s. We saw them setting up kill zones, said Tex Milligan, the team's gunner. 3s, digging in 3s. Adjusting fields of fire 3s. Like they were prepping for another battle 3s. And then it began 3s. The dead opened fire 3s. The SEALs returned fire, but bullets had no effect. 3s. The ghosts didn't fall 3s. They didn't bleed threes. They absorbed damage and kept advancing threes. The only defense was mobility stealth and staying out of their operational boundaries. Threes. They didn't follow us past a certain point, said Blackthorn threes. Like they were still assigned sectors threes. Even in death, they obeyed maps. Threes. The team escaped only by reaching the edge of what appeared to be an invisible perimeter. Threes. Once they crossed it, the dead stopped pursuing mid-step, like wind-up toys losing tension threes. Back at base, Blackthorn filed the only kind of report that could be accepted, environmental hallucination due to chemical exposure threes. But privately, the team knew the truth. They died in uniform, and the war never told them to stand down threes. Chief Petty Officer Wilbur Catfish Hensley had heard rumours, strange patrol logs, boats losing power, phantom radio transmissions, but he chalked it all up to Mekong madness threes. That changed on May 14th, 1970, when PBR 847 stumbled upon something older than the war, older than the country, maybe older than time itself, threes. The patrol had been routine threes. Hensley's crew, boatswain's mate, second class, Thaddeus, Poe, Dexter Gunners, mate, third class, Leopold Vasquez, and engineman fireman Clifford Kowalczyk was investigating reports of VC infiltration through a narrow tributary marked Echo 7 3S. As the locals didn't use its U3s, S3s, Navy designation 3 years. They called it Song Lin, the River of Souls 3s. It didn't feel haunted, Poe Dexter would later testify threes. It felt watched threes. Like the trees knew our names threes. That day the river was unusually low threes. Dry season conditions exposed sandbars and ancient stone outcroppings, usually hidden beneath layers of brown silt. But it was the sonar reading that stopped them cold, a symmetrical structure, massive geometric resting 60 feet below the surface threes. We thought it was a wreck at first, Hensley said threes. But then we saw the layout threes. Corridors threes, courtyards threes, columns threes. Somebody had built the thing threes. Down there threes. As they scrambled to recalibrate their gear, she arrived threes. No splash threes. No ripple threes. Just presence threes. From beneath the water a figure began ascending, as if climbing invisible stairs. Threes. A Vietnamese woman in her 70s, dressed in immaculate court attire threes. Dry threes. Composed threes. Unblinking threes. She stepped up onto the surface and stood level with their boat, the current brushing past her feet without resistance threes. I am Madame too, she said threes. Guardian of the sunken palace threes. Witness to all wars that have touched these waters threes. Her English was flawless too. Flawless. Linguistic analysis would later suggest a fusion of ancient Mandarin French colonial dialect and a rhythm that didn't match any living tongue. Threes. She told them the truth in a way no military intelligence briefing ever could threesies. Beneath their hull lay a palace intentionally submerged during the Mongol invasions to protect its archives, relics and secrets. Threes. The structure had survived floods, empires' bombings, threes. It was built to remember threes. This palace exists outside of time. Madame Tu said threes. The past and future live side by side here. Threes. What has happened and what will happen are both present threes. When she turned and began walking back down into the water, the river parted threes. A tunnel of air formed, spiraling downward, like a vortex in reverse threes. The crew followed, not because they were ordered to, but because something inside them needed to understand threes. What they found was an underwater city untouched by decay. Threes. Walls of jade threes. scrolls that glowed with internal light. 3s. Armor sets arranged like altars. 3s. Rooms full of maps marking battles that hadn't happened yet. 3s. And then the Hall of Witnesses. 3s. Encased in crystal tanks stood soldiers, civilians, revolutionaries, colonizers, all dead, all preserved, all aware. 3s. Not ghosts. 3s. Not corpses. 3s. Something else. 3s. Living records. 3s. Souls suspended in purpose. 3s. They looked at us, our Vasquez recalled 3s, like we were just another chapter. 3s. Each spirit could recount their final breath. 3s. Each carried knowledge of tactics, betrayal, diplomacy, pain. 3s. They didn't scream. 3s. They waited. 3s. Madame Tu explained that they were archivists of truth preserved by ritual and memory. 3s. They monitored wars as if cataloguing weather patterns. 3s. They remembered everything. 3s. Then she offered them a gift. 3s. We can help you. 3s. We can show you where your enemies hide. 3s. What they plan. 3s. But you must protect this place. 3s. The price was simple. Leave the palace untouched. 3s. Respect its waters. 3s. Avoid triggering events that would disturb the balance. 3s. Hensley agreed. 3s. He didn't ask permission. 3s. He just knew it had to be done. 3s. Before they resurfaced, Madame Tu gave him a medallion carved jade warm to the touch, glowing from within this. Throw this into deep water, she said this, and we will answer this. When we came back up, everything closed behind us, like it had never opened, Kowalczyk said. 3s. But we all remembered. 3s. The intel they received from that moment forward, uncannily accurate. 3s. Convoys intercepted. 3s. Ambushes avoided. 3s. Operations rerouted based on information no one else could have known. 3s. The jade was used 3 more times before the war ended. 3s. Each time it worked. 3s. And to this day, Hensley keeps it in a locked drawer far from sunlight. 3s. He says it still glows when he dreams about her. 3s. She wasn't a ghost, he says. 3s. She was memory made flesh. 3s. And she knew every war America would ever fight before they even began. 3s. During Operation Giant Slingshot River Division 507-4 wasn't hunting ghosts. 3s. They were hunting enemy supply routes along the Cambodian border, routine interdiction sweeps, high alert but predictable 3s. That night, 6 PBRs moved in formation, flanked by silence, pushing against currents, thick with silt and history. 3s. Then without warning, every boat went dark. 3s. Engines shut off. 3s. Radios crackled with static. 3s. GPS screens flickered before dying completely. 3s. The flotilla drifted in place helpless, as if the river had decided to take back control. 3s. It wasn't enemy fire, said Chief Petty Officer Ezekiel Drummond. 3s. It was like we'd crossed an invisible line and the Mekong cut the lights. 3s. What happened next has been officially described as a collective hallucination under duress. 3s. But the men who were there remember differently. 3s. The water began to change. 3s. Slow at first. 3s. Then impossible. 3s. The muddy brown gave way to deep arterial red. 3s. Not dye. 3s. Not rust. 3s. Not metaphor. 3s. Real blood. 3s. Thick warm human. 3s. Rising from the depths like the Mekong itself was bleeding. 3s. I dipped my hand into it, said Corpsman 3rd Class Robert Van 3s, and it clung to me. 3s. Coagulated. 3s. Tested me. 3s. Then came the voices. 3s. Not above the water. 3s. Not from radios. 3s. From the river itself. 3s. Dozens. 3s. Hundreds. 3s. 1,000s. 3s. Speaking in languages no single translator could decipher. 3s. French. 3s. Vietnamese threes, Japanese threes, English threes, Latin threes. Some dialects hadn't been spoken in centuries threes. They weren't screaming threes. They were reporting threes, combat updates threes, coordinates threes, requests for reinforcements that would never come threes. It was like tuning into every battlefield transmission from the last 100 years all at once, said radioman Orville Pennington threes, and none of them knew they were dead threes. And then the soldiers rose threes, not swimming threes, not floating threes, materializing from beneath the crimson surface threes. They stood on the river like it was concrete ghosts in full uniform, the threes. French foreign legionnaires, Japanese imperial troopers, Viet Minh fighters, American advisors threes, bayonets threes, helmets threes, tattered flags threes. Their faces told the truth. Every one of them had died violently, threes. But they weren't enemies anymore, Drummond said threes. They stood shoulder to shoulder, like death had erased the politics threes. From their ranks emerged a single man, threes. He moved with purpose threes, decorated threes, scarred threes. Authority radiated from every inch of him, threes. He was French, late 40s, clean boots, walking on blood. Threes. I'm Colonel Etienne Marron, he announced threes. Killed at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, threes. And I speak for the dead, threes. His message was simple, threes. You've entered territory claimed by us, threes. The forgotten threes. The fallen threes. The ones your governments never mourned, threes. We are not angry, threes. We are finished, threes. And we demand the same from you threes. They weren't there to kill threes. They were there to negotiate a ceasefire, threes. Not between nations, threes. Between worlds, threes. Every war adds to our ranks, Marin said threes. Every ambush, every raid, every forgotten soldier who bleeds into these rivers joins our formations, threes. And now their army had grown too large to ignore threes. They didn't ask for treaties threes, or land threes, or reparations threes. They asked for acknowledgement threes, respect threes, limits threes, certain zones to remain untouched spirit demilitarized zones, full moon periods to be honoured, no operations, civilian casualties to be minimized, or retaliation would follow. The negotiation didn't happen with words threes. Not really threes. It was telepathic threes. Concept downloads threes. Feelings transmitted into skulls threes. Every sailor knew what was agreed upon threes. I didn't hear it threes. I just knew it threes. Like someone had rewritten my memories, said Drummond threes. As the ceasefire took hold, the ghost army slowly began to submerge threes. But not before leaving one last message, threes. All weapons on board the flotilla, including threes. 50 caliber machine guns, grenade launchers, sidearms that had been transformed. 3 years. Not destroyed. Threes. Transformed. Threes. Into things that couldn't harm threes. Barrels turned to woven reeds. Threes. Clips unraveled into flower petals. Threes. Steel into softwood. Threes. I pulled the trigger and roses fell out, Pennington said. Threes. Not a metaphor, threes. Actual rose petals. Threes. Still damp. Threes. Then silence, threes. Engines rebooted. Threes. Radios cleared. Threes. The river returned to brown threes. The blood was gone, threes. But none of the men were the same threes. We didn't survive an ambush, Drummond said threes. We survived a message to threes. Most of the sailors who encountered the Guardians of the Mekong Delta never talked about it again threes. Not publicly threes. Not even with family threes. But in veterans' halls, psychiatric clinics and whispered phone calls in the middle of the night. Fragments of their stories leaked out stories that hinted at something bigger than war threes. Something that came back with them threes. Chief Wilbur Hensley retired quietly in 1973. threes. Moved to Ohio threes. Taught high school shop class threes. He never spoke about the jade medallion to his wife threes. But his daughter would later recall nights where he sat by the kitchen sink at 3:16 a.m. staring at the faucet like it was whispering threes. Sometimes she said he'd just say, "They're singing again, threes." Then he'd go back to sleep, threes. Over the years, scattered reports began surfacing from Delta veterans' unmarked phone calls, with no voice, just Vietnamese lullabies. Dreams showing real-time battlefield footage from places they'd never been. Sudden fluency in Vietnamese despite no formal study. A magnetic pull toward water lakes, rivers, even bathtubs, with no explanation. "It's not PTSD," one unnamed sailor said threes. "It's connection threes. They made us into witnesses threes, and we're still carrying it threes." Even more bizarre are the reports from descendants, children and grandchildren of men who served on the River Kids, drawing maps of the Mekong from memory. Teens speaking Vietnamese in their sleep. College students becoming experts in Southeast Asian history without prior interest. Young veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan claiming to see the drowned ones watching them from irrigation ditches. "Whatever happened in that river," said Dr. Threes. Claire Banham, a military psychologist, it rewrote more than memory. Threes. It rewired legacy threes. Vietnamese refugees in the U-3s, S-3s, noticed it first, threes. Some would cross paths with American veterans at community events, temples, even grocery stores, and feel something strange threes. We say they carry spirit anchors, explained Ba Lei, a traditional healer from Westminster, California, threes. They are not haunted threes. They are hosting threes. In 2011, a classified DoD report analysing unexplained cognitive anomalies in Navy veterans mentioned a term never seen in official military language before spiritual binding due to combat-sustained ethereal contact threes. Translation: the war touched something threes, and it touched back threes. Satellite images taken decades after the war still reveal anomalies in the Mekong heat signatures from underwater structures no engineering scan can explain. Electromagnetic pulses that mimic Cold War jamming systems, but coming from the riverbed. Disruptions in drone signals, often above areas where ghost encounters were reported in 1970. There are places in the Delta where reality still bleeds. One intelligence analyst admitted anonymously 3S, and it always bleeds upward 3S. Perhaps most unsettling of all, every major military action since 1975 involving waterborne operations in Southeast Asia has been preceded by an increase in reported visions, dreams, and unexplained phenomena among U-3s, S-3s, veterans of the Vietnam War, 3s. It's like they're warning us, Hensley once muttered before his death. Threes. The river remembers threes, and it's not done watching threes. Today, most of the men who served in river patrol forces are gone threes, but the songs still rise at dawn, low and melodic from the pipes in old VA hospitals threes. Some say the Mekong never let go threes. Others believe that certain men were chosen not to fight, but to remember for the rest of us threes. You don't leave the Delta, says one surviving crewman threes. It follows you home threes. Because in the end, it was never just a river threes. It was a witness threes, a judge threes. A living archive of every soul who ever died in its waters threes. And in its quiet way, it left a mark that no therapy, no medal, no time could erase threes. We weren't haunted, one veteran said threes. We were rewritten threes.